afternoon, everybody, and welcome in to the Maize and Blues. Good afternoon, Michigan football on this Wednesday, January the 8th. January the 8th. The one-year anniversary of the Michigan football team going down to Houston and beating Washington 34-13 to win the national championship. Yeah, you're always going to look back, whether it is the January the 8th or as the years go by, 5-year, 10-year, 15, 25. What a day, what a night it was, what a season it was. And here we are a year later. Welcome in as we are prepared to talk Michigan football and Michigan basketball today. I think that you're a Michigan football fan. You do pause for a second today and say, oh, man, that was sweet a year ago. You'll remember exactly where you were at, what you did and all those kind of things. And you'll remember that for the rest of your life. I think you know that. But, this, even though the season wasn't great for Michigan, it ended up fantastic, beating Ohio State and Alabama. It just, as I was sitting here thinking about coming down here, there's not a lot to complain about, which is a good thing. And you're always looking for something where you get kind of you can argue or you can debate. As we sit here right now, Michigan with how they did in recruiting, there's a lot of times, you're saying, oh, well, what about this? And they did a really good job in recruiting. Oh, great job in recruiting so far in the portal. We're going to break down a little bit of the portal. I think they've done a good job. I mean, if you want to split some hairs and say they've done a bad job, I would argue with that. I don't think anybody. You might wanted this player or that player or a couple more players, and they've got another chance once spring comes around. So I wouldn't sweat that too much. And then the thing that I think I've complained about the most over the 4 years that I've been doing this podcast is NIL and Michigan's position in NIL, and if they would be able to get it right. And I think Michigan has got it right. They've got their NIL sorted out where they're in a good spot. If I had to go over the biggest complaint that I would have about college football as it applies to Michigan over the last 30 years, it was losing players to teams that were paying them. And that was a frustrating thing. It was just part of it. Everybody's like, well, they cheat. And, SEC is like, why don't you do it? And everybody's like, kind of shrugging their shoulders. And nobody cared, apparently, or, not even apparently, nobody cared that the players were getting paid. And, so now that Michigan is able to do it, that has leveled the playing field. And with the things that Michigan has an advantage with, all the things that they have with the school and their brand and the stadium and tradition and all of that, it helps, so they're in a great spot. And then, basketball last year, Michigan won the national championship, but the basketball team had their worst record ever. And they come back with Dusty May. And as we sit here and broadcast right now on this 8th, everything looks really good with the basketball program. If you just were like me and said, the bar, if Michigan can make the NCAA tournament, and with Dusty May coming in and not being really able to, he did get some recruits, but you looked at the top 100, top 150, and they were all pretty much, with the exception of one or two, one of them that was committed to Michigan and went elsewhere, that he was had to throw together players in the transfer portal. If they could just make the NCAA tournament, it would be a huge shock. I mean, a huge shock right now if the team didn't make the NCAA tournament. So, a good news Wednesday, a fabulous January the 8th, whatever you want to call it. That's what it is. I mean, if it was a miserable one, we'd call it, like we'd see it, say, hey, it would be a bad day, but it doesn't feel like that. So you say, well, what are we going to talk about today? Well, I'm going to look at the portal and who's coming and who's going. I broke it down from offense to defense, and I missed a name on Monday. I've added that name so you can take a look at it, and I can give you my thoughts there. I'll touch on the basketball team and the job that Dusty May has been doing. But I thought today with Bryce Underwood, we'll be talking an awful lot about the quarterback in the spring. Oh, we've been talking about him. We'll continue to talk about him. And this week on the Maize and Blue Review, I put out a post and asked people if Bryce Underwood was the most anticipated debut of a Michigan athlete ever. And I had my own ideas, and I thought, yes, it is. It's the most anticipated because he's a number one guy. He is local. And then I factor in that how the season went at the quarterback position and just how, I mentioned the 30 years of Michigan losing out on players because they weren't able to compete financially. And now they are. And so I think all of those things together make it where his debut, whenever it is, if it's game 1, game 2, game 5, I think it'll be by game 5 or game 6, it will be the most anticipated debut ever. Now, I'm kind of old, but I don't go back and I don't recall Rick Leach or Cassie Russell making their debut. So people wanted to make a case for them. And, the case for the Fab Five, the greatest recruiting class ever. Chris Webber was the number one player in the country. It was a different time. I wasn't around Michigan, and I can remember, this makes it seem like so long ago. It's just where where it is, the early 90s. I had a friend of mine clipping a newspaper article and then mailing it out to me, one where, you have to put a stamp on it and actually, put it in the mailbox. And then I would get the mail, and then I'm opening up and I'm like, wow, Michigan is looking like they're going to have a hell of a basketball team in the future. And then I recall I wasn't in that first year of the Fab Five. I wasn't around in the state of Michigan either. And a friend of mine sent a cassette tape, VHS, via mail as well. And I couldn't watch basketball for an entire year. I wasn't in jail or anything. I just wasn't in the country. I wasn't in the United States. And so I had one tape. It was Michigan Duke. And I don't know if I watched that, 5, 10, who knows how many times, a bunch. But that was an anticipated debut of the Fab Five. And then I was around for the hype for Drew Henson. And Henson, you may think that, and I think that it'd be pretty close if we wanted to make a case that Henson's debut would have been as highly anticipated because he was a local legend, a local prodigy. I would buy that. My counter would be because the year before Michigan won the national championship, and then they were coming back, and with Henson, they had of some viable quarterbacks. We didn't know how viable in terms of Tom Brady. But, they had just had the success the year before. There wasn't this ultimate push. And the other thing about Henson that might make it where Henson, you could say he was just more of a ballyhooed recruit, even though, the recruiting rankings were different then. I mean, he was up there as like this super recruit and everything, but he was also this great baseball player. He had set the high school career record for home runs. And the idea is that, hey, he's going to be a great football player. He's going to be a great baseball player. He can go over, you're going to be this awesome home run hitter. And then he's going to be this Heisman Trophy quarterback. And then, so those are a couple. I mean, there's others, just a few years ago, I was really anticipating the starting debut of Dylan McCaffrey. He came in a situation against Notre Dame on the road where Shea Patterson don't know what was wrong with Shea Patterson. I got a little banged up, cramps, I think. But McCaffrey came in and performed pretty well. And then there was a Nebraska game where Michigan was blowing out the Cornhuskers, and he threw this long touchdown, 60-yarder or something to Ronnie Bell. But I was sold on him, not just because of those things that I just mentioned, but also just his family. You know, his dad was this NFL player who had won Super Bowls. His brother, Christian McCaffrey, was this great NFL player. His grandfather was in the Olympics. All of this. I mean, it's just the bloodline. So it's like, McCaffrey's going to be great. I can't wait. And I would say that. I can't wait to see him hit the field. And it never happened. He got hurt against Penn State with a shoulder. The offseason went on, and Joe Milton was throwing the ball 80 yards with a flip of the wrist, and he took off, and that was it. And you never saw him or heard from him again. But I say all that, just I'm just thinking about Bryce Underwood and the hype. But I think it's the most anticipated debut of a Michigan athlete ever. And then I start thinking about the expectations for Underwood. I expect him to be great. Well, what does that mean? I expect him to be the number one pick in the NFL draft. Does that matter? Not really. I mean, it wouldn't. If he's the number one pick in the NFL draft, of course it's going to be great for him, but you would think that that's going to be great for Michigan, that he will have shown everybody wearing the maize and blue that, he deserves to be the number one pick in the NFL draft. Let's see, next year, 25, 26, 27, the after 3 years. So that, I don't know if I don't, it doesn't matter. So the expectations aren't really for him to be the number one pick, but I would think the expectations for him to be a pretty high pick in the NFL draft. It's not going to be a disappointment or a failure if he, let's say he was a top 5 pick or something like that. Then you think on the field, so you say, well, multiple championships. Well, it is, that's where the team part, comes in. He could be great. He could be the number one pick in the NFL draft, and Michigan might not win the national championship, but do I expect Michigan? So do you expect Michigan to win a national championship over the next 3 years? That's the thing you start thinking of. I expect them to make the college football playoff. I'm thinking about them making the college football playoff next year. And if they've got Bryce Underwood, and I just look at how they're doing in recruiting. I look at how Sharon Moore finished up the season, how they're doing with the transfer portal, and just the lay of the land in college football. I think over the next 3 years, I expect Michigan to be in the college football playoff based on all of those things. So then I get back to the, winning a championship. You have to answer that. I think they have. I'm going to say yes. I'm expecting them to win a national championship over the next 3 years. When you get a guy like this and you've got everything going for you and it's all lined up, I think that, I'm not trying to put, it's not an unreal expectation, to say, yes, win a national championship. Is it easier or more realistic to say, well, they should be competing, but forget it. I think when you get a guy, just throw that out. I expect them to win a national championship over the next 3 years. So the final one, when it comes down to expectations for me and for Underwood, is something that's already been talked about quite a bit and will be talked about, I think, the most until the opener, is if he is going to start from game one. Now, I think that is a fine expectation if you're a fan. All of these things that you heard about him. The thing is that for me, it not that it doesn't matter. I kind of want him to start from game one. I want him to go into spring and then just to be like, yeah, oh yeah. I mean, we brought everybody in for the competition, but it's just obvious. I mean, he is just that good. It doesn't matter that he's 17 years old and is, turning 18 in mid-August. I mean, he just has it, the it. And there's no doubt. He's the best quarterback, and he might be the best quarterback in the country right away. That's not what I expect. That's more of what I hope. I don't think it doesn't matter with all of those other things about winning a championship, being a number one pick, if he starts the opener. I hope he does. But if he starts, game 3 or game 5, there's nothing negative about that part, but that's the thing that's going to be talked about the most, whether he's going to be in there game 1 or game 3 or game 5 or whatever. Hope the first game, why not? Why not just have that kind of expectation? But, expectation. Why not put that kind of expectation on him? Just knowing that part, it doesn't matter. Well, I don't know. Does it matter if he starts game 1 to you or not? Or no, it doesn't. It doesn't matter about his ultimate success, even next year, or Michigan's ultimate success on the field next year if he starts for game 1. And yet it's going to be talked about the most out of all of those things. So I accept that. I know that. That's where I sit as we're talking about this today about Bryce Underwood. Now, I just said a bunch of stuff over the last 15 minutes, and I just wanted to see where the people are at when it comes down to the most anticipated debut. I think Underwood's number 1. And if your expectations are like mine, winning a national championship, being a number 1 pick in the NFL draft, and then I'll say, making the college football playoffs for 3 years, and then, starting from day 1. But that last one is not like some kind of deal breaker for me. If he does not start day 1, I'm not going to be sitting here, this is a failure. Sharon Moore doesn't know what he's doing, and all of that. So I've repeated myself on that. So that's where I'm at. Let's see what the people think of it all. Adam talking about Michigan basketball. We will get to that coming up straight ahead. And a lot of people that are jumping in here. We've got old Ripstar talking about Davis Warren, asking the question about Davis Warren. Well, the thing is about Davis Warren, it's interesting. I've talked about this even before he was injured. He's got an ACL, which takes a minimum of 9 months. And so that just so happens to correlate with the start of the season. Is he ready for week 1? I would think that he would be, if everything went well, you would think about him being ready to go maybe in October, maybe a little bit. The timelines are different, but I don't know what they had in writing. Michigan had a number for Davis Warren and what they thought he was worth to be in the quarterback room, whether they envisioned him being the starter for the beginning of the season. I think they envisioned him being in the competition with Mikey Keene and Bryce Underwood. How much was that worth? And when they offered that up to him, did Davis Warren say, well, yeah, I'd like to come back, but I'd also like to see what else I could get out there? And then now he's injured. Is that number different? So you're asking the question, and I'm asking the question that I don't know. And then you're asking me about if he would transfer. I would think that the transfer part would be lessened with him having injured, having him, tore his ACL and being out for 9 months. RS. What team would be out there that you could think of that would look and say, yeah, we'd want him to come in and compete for our starting job, and we're going to give him, that kind of money, and yet we're not going to be able to get a look at him, and we're going to have somebody else because he might not be ready for the start of the season. It's an interesting thing. It's a question that I'll be looking to ask somebody at Michigan when you get a chance for that. I don't, some of the times when you guys talk about things, but I don't know what you're talking about, I skip those things. So when you're talking about other channels or other people, there's really nothing against any of those people or anything. But uh, if you have a question specifically, I'd give you an opinion on it, but I don't really know for sure what's going on here. I do know that Hadley, I'm familiar with Hadley. He is asking me if I knew that it was a year ago on this date that Michigan won a national championship. Well, I guess people were jumping in pretty early. That was my lead with this show. Yeah. Yeah, I remember it. I had gone over to my wife's cousin's house to watch the first half. I remember he still had his Christmas decorations up, and I recall of sitting there and we're just watching the game, and then I saw Donovan Edwards rip off a 41-yard touchdown, and then I watched Donovan Edwards rip off a 46-yard touchdown, and by then the party was really rolling. I mean, this was all in the first quarter. I mean, this, everything's touched off, a lot of excitement, in the household at the party there and everything else. And then Michigan would go on to win it 34-13. And then 5 days later, there ended up being a parade in Ann Arbor, which was pretty memorable. So yeah, I remember that, Hadley. I think I'll remember it forever. So that's where I'm at with it. Okay, I was talking about highly publicized debuts, and Paul's going back to old number 98, and that he was highly publicized and how it was going. For the time, old number 98. I don't know. Did freshmen? I don't even remember when true freshmen or freshmen, like in basketball. Kareem, Lou Alcindor, and those guys at some point in the 70s, they couldn't play with the varsity. They had to play with the freshman team, which is weird when you think about, so it is. That's just weird. You think about it. And then they couldn't dunk, which is weird too. So was it the same thing with football? So I don't have Tom Harmon. They're like, in a couple of years, this guy's going to be pretty good at Michigan and everything else. So that's it. A couple more here. We'll say Ferris says the Rose Bowl felt more like the title game. The national championship game was more like a coronation. In the end, I think you're exactly right. And there really wasn't a time in the Washington game that I thought Michigan was going to lose. And I thought, U of M got off to a really poor start in the Rose Bowl. Remember, they almost threw the pick on the very first play. They had a special, they had a fumble, muffed a punt. Smash Morgan did. The defense got gashed for like a 30-yard run, and it was like, wow, these are all the things that. And then even in the third quarter, Alabama had it going. I was like, well, you've seen this before. It really felt like they were going to lose. I mean, it felt like there was a real chance to lose the game. Now, there was a point in the second half of the Washington game that I recall going on Twitter, and some of like the biggest Michigan fans were on there just repping Sharon Moore. They got to do this. They got to throw the ball, whatever else. And then, JJ made a sneak, and they got it going, and it ended up being okay. But, man, people were freaking out a little bit when you're talking about that. You're right. Rick Leach did start as a freshman. I wonder if the, years before that, I don't remember. And maybe it would have been the same of basketball or anything else. So I don't know. The thing where you say Chad Henne is that I'll have to say that I don't think that that's true, that Chad Henne was one of the most anticipated debuts, in that nobody knew that he was starting until the morning of the opener. Nobody. Saturday morning, a small paper in Pennsylvania, it might have been on late Friday night, but Saturday morning they came out and said Chad Henne is going to start for Michigan. Nobody had that scoop. I was working in Ann Arbor at that point, and nobody. I have no problem crediting anybody or any news, anybody that had it. Everybody thought it was going to be Matt Gutierrez. Nothing leaked out that it was going to be Chad Henne. So now the anticipation, if you wanted to say from Saturday morning when you start hearing at the tailgates or you're listening to the radio at that point, the pregame, they're like, hey, Chad Henne's going to start, the true freshman. Well, then, yeah, things went to 0 to 100 pretty fast. But can you really anticipate a debut of a true freshman when nobody thought that he was going to start until the morning of the opener? So I would say that no, it wouldn't be the case with that one right there. So that's how I saw it. Go Blue Wolverine says DG was a big disappointment. I don't know if DG is Devin Gardner. I am going to say that Devin Gardner was not a big disappointment to me. I would say that the Gardner's career, that he should have been the quarterback over Shoelace. And Denard Robinson should have been the running back. And they shouldn't have had Devin Gardner as a wide receiver. They should have had Devin Gardner, he should have been the quarterback. So they messed him up. That's not his fault. And I think about it wasn't the first Notre Dame game, the second Notre Dame game. When he started, that was his best game. I know he threw more yards, I think, at Indiana or whatever else, set a record, but he was great in that game. So, overall, I don't feel like it was a disappointment, but that's not even the question. We're talking about most anticipated debut. Now, who had a nice debut, but it wasn't anticipated so much, was Denard Robinson. I remember it was against Western where, they're talking about, he didn't wear shoelaces. He comes in. Was this his very first snap? Like he gets the ball and he kind of dropped it, but then he went like 30 yards from a touchdown. And it was just, it was great from that point on and everything else. So that's it. Okay. Hadley's in agreement with me. He said you freshmen couldn't be on the varsity until the mid 70s. So yeah, maybe right away, Rick Leach, but it almost feels like maybe the first year. That's 76. That when it could happen, Michigan got Rick Leach on the field, and it happened. So how about that? Back in the day, we're talking about. Thanks for the compliment on my flannel. People talking about Harmon on the basketball team. Previous to 60s, maybe in the 50s too. But definitely prior, to the 50s, it was like high school. When I was in high school, people played all three sports. And you had guys like Benny Oosterbaan and who else? Just these great three sports, Ron Kramer. Like these guys were great basketball players, great baseball players, and great football players. Now, I was never a great athlete. I played so much baseball. I remember heading in my 8th grade, heading into 9th grade, I played on 3 different baseball teams. I was all about baseball. Loved it. But then I, got to high school and the first thing up, football, freshman football. I played football. I really liked football. Then I went to basketball. I loved basketball. Well, I got to baseball and I was like, I played so much. I didn't play. You go right from one to the other. And I was like, I'm going to tap the brakes on baseball. I don't know. I don't really regret that because I had a great time. I can recall thinking, it was my dad telling me, you don't want to regret this. You get right over there. And I said, I'm not going to regret it. And I really didn't. But yeah, I'm just talking about the early 20th century players would, even in college, they would, they went all three. They were great in track, football, basketball, everything. So that is it. Hey, THS, I'm going to tell you, I appreciate you. Thanks so much. The first time that I saw you get in was about a week or two ago, and then I hadn't said that was the first time that I had seen you. I don't know if you're somebody that you've changed your avatar. You've got Michigan with a 38-30, but then I'm with you. Um, I'm not familiar with this, so I don't understand that. It happens. And an alternate universe, maybe a pickleball champion. Yeah, I haven't. I think I would like pickleball. I have enjoyed over the years many racket sports, starting out with tennis and then racquetball and then badminton. I think those are my three favorites. But so pickleball is kind of right in the same kind of deal like that. I would be down with some pickleball. I just have never played it. I'm in there. Here's the coach that I'm not really sure what everybody is talking about. Yeah, well, you get the shuttlecock. I think badminton gets a kind of a bad rap. It's I don't know if you play badminton, like I'm the silver spoon or something. Maybe it's more of a upper class game. Like if you say like croquet or something like that. But yeah, it's a pretty nice game. A little shuttlecock, boom. Getting over there, not bad. Sports radio, yeah, it is kind of a racket. Here we go. Yeah, okay. I'm not sure where it's all coming from, but we do have some Dan Campbell talk, which maybe at the end of the show I will get into some thoughts on the Lions. Now here's THS. He says, I have to go back to work. He says Arch Manning needs to play. Look at the Texas spring game. That was from the Michigan victory over Florida in the Outback Bowl before the December 31st victory over Alabama. So you're saying Arch Manning needs to play in the game coming up against Ohio State. I think he's going to play. And so, if you're Sark, I bet if we were down in Austin, the conversation about how much Arch Manning is going to play, when you insert him, what it really means, are there going to be a few people that call in and say, yeah, we want Arch Manning to start? And then you're like, well, that's pretty, now that's hot. And you might feel like it's their best chance because Ohio State's so good that that's the direction that you want to go. Oh, I'm there. We're going to get to that Lions talk. Well, see, here's THS again, coming in hot with now throwing down C notes. That's appreciated. That's as appreciated as anything, coming in hot with that kind of game. And you got to go back to work. Yeah. When you're rolling out tips like that, Happy New Year. Let's go. Let's do it. What do you want to talk about, THS? I'm with you there. You are there. Coach is talking about some breaking news. I had some breaking news here as well, and you're coming over the top with even some more breaking news. My breaking news was that Max Bredeson is coming back for his 5th year. And that is some great news. I didn't know if, as the team calls him, Bredy was going to come back. But every time that I went to players' news conferences this year, some are going to be better than others. But anytime you wanted a guy to talk about one of their teammates, you just had to say, give me a little Max Bredeson story. And the guys would just, all of them would just light up and talk about Bredeson. They just love that guy. Bredeson's brother played at Michigan. Bredeson was a walk-on, gets the scholarship, and now he's, you say the epitome of a Michigan football player is whatever you want it to be. But there's a part about a lunch pail Bredeson, he was a quarterback in high school. He's he looks like he could be an offensive lineman. He was a quarterback. He's a tight end. He's a fullback. Fullbacks. We love fullback. It's a throwback. I don't know how young people feel like, what are you talking about? All this, Max Bredeson. It's just one of those guys that you really root for kind of thing. And, the teams, and this is the nice part about NIL. There's some drawbacks to NIL. Sure, guys jumping around. Some people don't like it. There's a lot to complain about how college football has changed. I like it mostly. I didn't like that Michigan wasn't involved in a college football playoff. But my point here is that I think if there was no NIL in the kind of season that Max Bredeson had, I could easily see him saying, I'm going to go to the pros. The Ravens, they could use a fullback. I think the Chargers, how many other teams even use the fullback? Those two, they certainly do. But I think that whatever Michigan was saying, they have Eli Owens, who was a recruit this year, who's coming in, who is it looks like he's tracking to be the next Max Bredeson. But now those two can play together. I really like that. I think it's Max Bredeson, and I don't have I usually don't talk about people's looks and everything else. Whatever. Sometimes I do. I say I usually don't. But Bredeson has this hair that he could be transported back into the 80s. Like he looks like he uses a blow dryer and kind of flips it up like this 80s kind of hairstyle. I remember when he came in for one of the press conferences, I'm like, that's an 80s hairstyle. It's pretty cool. And so, he's got that going for him as well. All right, well, let me see what somebody was saying about guys committing and something to be excited about. I don't doubt what you're saying, and maybe what you're talking about and everything else. But yeah, I'll have to go back to see what somebody was saying. This guy, coach, is talking about two guys headed to Michigan. I don't have the confirmation on that of CJ Sadler, and Alex Graham. I just don't have that confirmation, but it's nice to see some of it coming in here. Let's see. Ferris loved baseball more growing up, but he should have been more into tennis. It's the best sport to play as you get older. I can play competitively against opponents age 20 through 70. Yeah, I really like tennis from a young age. And then I'm pretty good at hitting returns and running around. What I'm not good at is serving, which is a really big part of tennis. So I can recall years ago playing doubles. And so you get in and you play doubles, and watching tennis, I just like watching. I like watching the women and men play tennis, mostly in the majors. But I enjoy it. But I like to play doubles. You only have to serve, for me, who I'm not very good at it, half the time. And then you don't have to, I don't want to make it sound like I'm lazy or anything, but you don't have to move as much. It's still a lot of fun. You don't have to move as much. You don't have to cover as much ground because you have your partner. And then you don't have to serve only half the time. So I really like that part. I think that, the best would be some, mixed doubles would be a lot of fun for me. I would like to do that. Let's see. Here's somebody. I don't know. My God. I'm laughing because I've moved down, I've moved up, and I'm looking for all the stuff to go through, and people are taking shots at other people and everything else. So let's move on. I said I wanted to look at the transfer portal. I didn't have all the players. I think this is right up to speed right now. Michigan has added 10 players from the transfer portal so far. Nice balance. 5 on offense and 5 on defense. So let's just take a look at them a little bit closer. Here are the guys that they've added out of the transfer portal on offense. Mikey Keene. We don't know. It's a pretty big deal now that we know that Davis Warren is out of the mix. Maybe he would be ready to start practicing, September 1st. You're going to miss all of spring, summer conditioning, and then fall training camp. He's not going to be able to compete for the starting job. So, how he fits into the mix, if at all, is to be determined, but he's not going to be the starter. So that puts a lot more focus on the transfer, Mikey Keene. He goes from having, I thought, breaking it down heading into the ReliaQuest Bowl, that there was a 33% chance that Davis Warren would start the opener, a 32% chance that Mikey Keene would start the opener, and a 31% chance that Bryce Underwood. And then I left a couple of percentages for, something, I don't know, Jaden Davis or something crazy, like a spring portal edition or something like that, which is unseen. But it was a fluid prediction, because now I would put Davis Warren having a 0% chance at starting the opener, and I would put Mikey Keene at having I would bump that percentage that he has up at, I'll put him at a 40%. I'll put Underwood at 39%, and then I'll put those other percentages because I know that they're going to be probably looking for another quarterback. Justice Haynes. I am like everyone else. I loved what I saw from Jordan Marshall in the bowl against Alabama. But I also know, having competition and having, a number of different backs and seeing a little bit of what Haynes has been able to do, this is an impact player, total impact player. Just like McCulley, the wide receiver, Donovan McCulley. Michigan is bringing in a nice crop of true freshman wide receivers. McCulley, who was hurt last year, was one of the all Big Ten players the year before at Indiana. I'm not saying that we're sleeping on him, but as we sit here right now, this could be Michigan's X wide receiver. That means you're the best one, right? X, Y, and Z. X comes first. I mean, this could be Michigan's go-to wideout. I'm not 100% sure about that. I don't know how he's come back. He's a big target and all of that, but if that would be a guess right now, that he would be Michigan's number one wideout. Now, again, I was talking about Samaj Morgan and how much I like him. People have seemed to have put him aside or buried him a little bit because of how he performed last year. And I would remind everybody that it takes two in the passing game. You need the receiver, and then, you need the passer. And then how these two interior offensive linemen, how they end up working out. We know that Michigan has their two tackles. They have Evan Link at left tackle and Andrew Sprague at right. I'm expecting that Gio El-Hadi is coming back at right guard and Crippen at center. So that leaves one spot left guard. Well, both Norton and Hatter look like interior offensive linemen. So if you told me it was going to be Norton, I'd say, okay. If you told me it would be Hatter, the competition will reveal itself. And I think anybody that was telling you anything different about that is, I don't know, who knows what they know about offensive linemen. That's how I see the offense breaking out with the different transfer portal guys on the offensive side. Yeah, got to have those blockers if you're going to be able to run the ball. Here's the defensive ads. Damon Payne from Belleville went to Alabama, coming in, depth spot. I don't know, from Payne to Williams to Rashawn Benny to Roderick Payne to Eno Etta, how that is going to reveal itself and work out. Again, this is one of those things that I think that we can make predictions, But you want depth, you want a rotation on the interior of the defensive line. Troy Bowles, who's pictured here, his dad's the head coach of the Tampa Bay Bucks, Todd Bowles. Troy from Georgia, that he gets on the field and is an impact player, that would not be super shocking to me if we sped ahead 9-10 months and they're like, nobody saw Bowles coming, being out there and playing as much as he's and saying, I think people it's not a super shock that he's out there and playing. The Metcalf guys, who knows? Tevis and TJ coming from Arkansas. I think about all the different safeties and corners and the opportunity where you can, rotate guys in. And I would think one of those guys could be. I do think over the last couple of years, what Michigan has been able to do in the transfer portal, they have been better than anybody in the transfer portal, anybody in place kickers. They went out and got Justin Turner from Louisville, and he was great. The national championship season. I mean, it's just as great as you could be until they got Zavada from Arkansas State, and he looks like he's even better than Mooney and Turner, and he's coming back. So they don't need him. Now, Hudson Hollenbach, who they also got out of the transfer portal from Mississippi State last year, he's back this year, and we saw him in the bowl game, and he looked like, he's pretty good. Tommy Doman left, and that was a little bit of a weird situation to me, but, Hollenbach in, but Michigan from Drake Nugent to the other offensive lineman that they were able to get for the national championship, Nugent, like I said, at center. You keep going back. Olu, the players that Michigan on the offensive line, they've done a good job being able to target guys and getting them in here. And on the defensive side, I think about Josiah Stewart, but then also the Josh Wallace and Amir Hall. Both of those guys, it took them until the last third of the season to really hit the ground running and be impact players, where prior to that, we were thinking like it really wasn't happening. So there we go. Adam is asking if Polly is ready. I don't know about that, but what I do know is that Wafel transferred, Owen Wafel. Polly, I think in the spring, could he, move in front? He's got a lot of guys to move in front. Sure. I think he could. Ready to compete. I would say he's ready to compete. That sounds like an easy way out. I'm not sitting here. Nobody's told me that. Watch out for Polly. Scar did go to a practice and was telling me that he thought that, he said something like Polly's really put together or something. I was like, that sounds pretty good to me. And everything. Now, the guys that they lost, I mentioned Wafel. If there's 18, you can count more if they're the non-scholarship guys. So that number might be different from place to place. I counted up and counted 18 scholarship guys that are on their way out. The most important in descending order here, I think Tyler Morris. I'd have been excited to have him back. He's off to Indiana of Doman. Again, that was a little curious that he took off. And then the rest, like Alex Orji had his shot. He came back and he was in the transfer portal and he came back. Maybe now with the injury to Warren, maybe Orji comes back to Michigan. I don't know, maybe. Gentry, when you have guys that haven't played but were highly thought of coming in, and then they're biding their time. We're not down there with the competition and what they see and who's passing them up or everything else. But, Gentry was one that I didn't want to see leave. Same thing with Ishmael and same thing with Wafel. But those I think are the most key guys you're talking about who they lost. So I want to tell you this before I get to Michigan basketball, and that is my invitation for you to come in and have a lot of fun at the Maize and Blue Review. You like talking with Michigan fans. That's what we're doing all day, all night. All day today, all day last night with the Michigan basketball team, what we're going to be talking about coming up straight ahead. Join the Maize and Blue Review today by going to michigan.rivals.com. We would love to see you over there. Oh, yeah, I'm ready for those college football playoffs that, Scar told me to bet Notre Dame. So I was trying to get a feel on those games. Scar talked me into Notre Dame. So the Michigan basketball team, they go to the West Coast and they beat USC, and then they come back and beat UCLA last night and beat them by 19. They're up by 18 in the first half, up by 10 at the half. UCLA comes back and takes the lead, but Michigan ends up in the end cruising to a 19-point victory. It was important. This was the first time that Michigan went with a different starting lineup. Roddy Gale Jr. was a late scratch with an injury. Don't know what his injury is, but he was out for the game. And then Michigan had Reuben Jones in the starting lineup. He picked up 2 fouls in the first half. And then Trey Donaldson picked up 2 fouls in the first half. And you had the Wolf of State Street, Danny Wolf, out there being the primary ball handler in the first half for Michigan. And it was interesting to watch him. There was a point in the first half where Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf were dominating. And it was just incredible. Vlad was throwing down dunks and he was shooting threes and making them. And Wolf was throwing hook passes, kind of no look, and he was draining threes and he was dribbling and looking like he was 6'4" rather than 7 foot. And then Jalen Rose, who was the color commentator, was calling Vlad Golden, Bill Russell. Sorry, not Bill Russell, Bill Walton. They're playing at Pauley Pavilion, and he was playing like Bill Walton. And then when Danny Wolf was doing all his stuff at 7 feet, Jalen called Danny Wolf the Joker for the Denver Nuggets. How he was playing, and you could see all those comparisons. So it was just a good time. And then the second half, both Golden and Wolf picked up their 4th fouls, and Michigan needed some other guys to step up, and Damari Burnett stepped up, and then Trey Donaldson stepped up and shot a 3-pointer from 30 feet from downtown, and I hadn't seen anyone attempt one in a game in a regular rhythm like that since Trey Burke. And so, it was it was an impressive performance by Dusty May's team. A lot of people say if they can rein in the turnovers, that this team can be a factor for the Big Ten regular season champions, and they could also be a team that can make, I'll say, a lot of noise in the NCAA tournament. And I agree with that. I think there might be a slight bit of too much focus on the turnovers because you are going to turn the ball over some. Some of them you watch and you're like, you really need to turn it over. Like it does feel like, and having said all that, it does feel like there's at least 3 or 4 a game that are unnecessary. The kind of where you're just like, it's, you don't have to, but you guys are good. You guys could be really good. It's one of those things that if you tighten up, that's going to help you. So I don't know that, when you hear people talk about Michigan basketball, the first thing they're going to say, oh yeah, they turn the ball over too much. All right. True. And there's a point to it. They're going to need to do a little bit better, but don't get too caught up in it. You can get a little bit caught up into it. Don't just get too caught up into it. And I think if you hear people, I'll say it, people that know ball, if you hear somebody talk about the turnovers, but then talk about there's a little bit too much talk about them, and that, they can improve on just a little bit there, and they can still reach whatever their ceiling is, that's the kind of person that knows ball. That's what I'm saying. If you're seeing somebody harping in on it, look, not everybody knows ball. Some people, might not just know football. It's hard to know all of these sports. Give them a break. So that's where I'm at. Before I mention a few things about the Lions, I want to take some more feedback. Andres saying that Vlad was an absolute monster. He was. Vlad is a monster. When you watch his tape, I remember doing a write-up on him. I'm like, he's a back-to-the-basket traditional 7-footer, but he's also pretty athletic in the pick and roll, can catch it and dunk, and he's also somebody who can face up and score with either hand. Now that's an awesome resume, a description of somebody that can do that, but he can do all of those things. And there was a little bit of an adjustment for him, but you can see him now. He's punching them in. He's running the floor. I think that he understands the toughness that it takes night in and night out to be one of the better players, say it, in the country. If he plays like he has played through these 15 games, they're at about the halfway point. I think they play 31 and then, the tournaments and stuff. So halfway through the regular season, damn near. If he plays like he has these last 10 games for the second half, he'll be a first-round draft pick. Mark it down. That's not crazy to talk about. That's how well he's playing. He's very entertaining. And, all the guys on Michigan's team can come back next year except Vlad and Reuben Jones. Everybody else is eligible to come back. So there you go. We'll take a couple more here. GBW, no soccer. Yeah. I don't know much about soccer. Every 4 years, I will watch a little bit of soccer and enjoy it, but that doesn't make me know much about soccer. Keegan's talking about he can analyze football, maybe. That's what we're talking about. Let's Keith talking good. Let's see. Oh, we've got a number of Michigan Go Blues in here, but Michigan Go Blue 1, 2, 3, 4 distinguishes himself with his cell phone picture and his avatar. He's talking Michigan basketball. People talking about Michigan basketball, bless all of you. Let's see. M Go Blue 1, 2, 3, 4 says great win. Burnett is automatic from the corner. Reuben Jones had huge rebounds. Vlad and Wolf dominant. Yeah, to me last night it was a 4-man show with Vlad and Wolf. Burnett, who not only was shooting big threes, he came up big defensively. And it's nice that you threw in Reuben Jones, but the fourth one was Trey. Old Trey, who in the one point in the second half was over there on the left wing and threw up a 3, and he missed by 5 feet. And, the Pauley Pavilions, yelling air ball. And I'm like, wow, what's, you can miss, but when you miss that bad. The funny part is that a couple minutes later, he shot that same one. And when he's splashing these, they're as wet as possible, these jumpers that he's taken. He's got the loft and the arc when they're hitting. Some guys, when you see them shoot and they splash through, you're just like, that guy, that jumper is something that, is he's really got something. He's really got he reminds me of, this is back in the day, the Cavs had a point guard named Mark Price from Georgia Tech, and he had the shot. And when Donaldson hits a 3, it kind of splashes like Mark Price from back in the day. And then when he threw in the 30-footer, it was like, whoa. But yeah, thank you. Michigan Go Blue 1, 2, 3, 4. And more basketball from Adam. Need Roddy and Walters for some 3-and-D games. Yeah, well, you're definitely going to need Roddy Gale. He is he plays a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde game, but it's nice when he's doing well. He's someone that you can make some winning plays for you. Yeah, I don't. Walters, I'm more of a cheddar guy right now. Walters, I'm going to have to see a little bit from him. The shot looks pretty good, 6'10", but I said it looked good when he was coming in, but I don't know if he's just he's not square. He's got he's just in a cold. Maybe he's a super streaky guy, but I'd like to. He's been streaky. He's been cold the whole first half of this year. He's been cold. I can't think that the rest of the team is very confident in him. When I watch him and I see him, even when he's wide open, I'm like, he's not going to make this. And then he doesn't. So it would be nice to see him have a game where he starts, popping 3, 4, 5 in a row. And then you start feeling about it. You start feeling it a little bit. You're saying he's rushing, maybe. Andre's opinion is that Walters looks a little uncomfortable out there on defense. Yeah, I think he looks uncomfortable all the way through. All of it. Cold. Play fast, but don't be in a hurry. I'm with you on all of that. Andres was saying on TV, say air ball one more time. Yeah, Andres, you were into it, huh? I was too. That was a little late night Michigan. The Sham God crossover was sick. Yeah, that was when he threw out a couple games ago where he put the guy on roller skates and he went this way and then he almost broke his back when he fell down. Love the. Now, I guess it's never a little bit too early to start talking about seeding. And here's Smash the Numbers talking about, well, he is a numbers guy. Can Michigan get a 3 seed and maybe win the Big Ten tournament? I think that is the ceiling. Look, I think that Michigan can win the Big Ten. And if Michigan can win the Big Ten, well, they can win the Big Ten tournament. And if Michigan win the Big Ten tournament and the Big Ten, then they could be higher than a 3 seed. So I don't really put a ceiling on them. I'm not telling you that I'm predicting that they can do that because I think guard play is so important, and I haven't seen enough of it. I actually haven't seen enough of the other teams either. Watched a little bit of Illinois. I've watched a little bit of Michigan State. Illinois is interesting because they are led more by bigger players as well. They've got a 7'1" Lithuanian, Kasparidis, who is their go-to guy, and then they've got Ivicevic, who is a 6'6" guard, Croatian. So they got a Lithuanian and a Croatian. They look pretty good, but I think Michigan can play with them. I think all the teams that I've seen, Maryland, Michigan can play with them. I'm surprised that Rutgers is a little bit better than because of the talent that they were bringing in. But yeah, I think that this team, when you're looking at it, it's more than just making the tournament. You're thinking about being a top 5 seed. Look, if you can get into the top 16 where you think where you're ranked, then, that's a 4 or 5 seed. I'm comfortable, saying that right now with where they're at. So that's how I feel. And that's it. The ceiling is the sky, or the sky is the ceiling. That's right. That's what Jordan said a couple of years ago in Chapel Hill. Well, I wanted to wrap this up talking about the Lions, and it comes back to where I was at the beginning of the show when I said there's really not a lot to complain about. Over the years, when you ever really needed anything to complain about, you had the old Lions to kick around because there was always something to complain about. My biggest complaint about the Lions over the years is that I had to root more against them than I did for them, because once they were eliminated from the playoffs, or it was almost a sure thing that they were going to be eliminated from the playoffs, well, the idea was don't root for them anymore. Lose for draft position. It doesn't do you any good. to cheer for them when they can't make the postseason. And most of my life, and I'll say it's also been a problem for the Red Wings and the Pistons, because over the last 10 years for almost both of those teams, you were rooting for them to lose more than you were the win. You can do that for a year, maybe two, maybe three, but after a while you kind of get used to, you want them to lose. So it's hard, but for the Lions, it was always like that. And now, even this year, with everything that they've done with Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, when they lost to the Bills, like I was in on them just like everyone else. Like, this is incredible. The way they're playing, the way that Holmes is drafted, the way Campbell has got the finger on the pulse of this team and in this community, everybody together, the home field advantage, the way they're playing. I mean, this thing, and then it all felt like it fell apart against the Bills, that they weren't going to win. Too many injuries. They lose their best run defender. They lose their great nickel corner, and it just felt like it was going to be over for them, and everybody felt that. I also knew at that time that if they beat the Bears and they went and beat the 49ers and then beat the Vikings and got the 1 seed, that would turn a little bit, where people would be more optimistic. What I didn't anticipate was that they were going to have the game like they had against the 49ers, where it was like, all right, Campbell, go ahead and rest everyone. Or, rest your Jared Goff, your key players. And Campbell's like, no, we're playing them. And the city's like, yeah, I got behind them. And then they won a very entertaining game. And even though I thought he should have rested folks, he didn't. And he gambled, and he came out smelling like a rose there. There's been a number of times where I'm thinking, okay, Campbell, you get a little bit too cute. And then he goes out there and does it. And then he's like, hey, yeah, just follow along here. I know what I'm doing. And so he did that against San Francisco. And then against the Vikings, to have the defense play the way that they did. So I was going to be encouraged if they won those 3 games and got the 1 seed. I was going to feel like, they can get to the Super Bowl. But I wasn't in a million years thinking that Aaron Glenn was going to play this man defense and Robertson was going to lock down, JJ, and they were going to play like that. So very encouraging. Anzalone gave him a shot in the arm for sure, coming back. So now I'm back feeling like, this team is going to go to the Super Bowl. And so that feels good. So I feel good about that. Somebody mentioned, speaking of JJ, Justin Jefferson, we saw JJ on the sideline, and I saw him, and I was like, I hadn't seen him, since last year's parade. And people were like, he looks like Anakin Skywalker. I'm like, he does, if you don't see somebody for a year, they look a little bit different. And so, JJ is looking a little bit different, but I don't know how to say it, freaked people out. People were interested in how he was looking and what was going on there. So that's it. The whole state of Michigan is up besides MSU. Well, you what was I going to say? You can't have it all, but maybe that is having it all, right? That's it. Yeah, the Wings just keep winning now, don't they? That's pretty good. That's a good point. Their new coach, McClellan, has been doing it. Yeah, JJ has joined the dark side. Yeah. I kind of liked how it worked out. If JJ, I didn't want JJ to, I wasn't hoping that he hurt his knee or anything. I don't know why I'm laughing. My point is that, we've got this Lions season, and it's worked out for Darnold and the Vikings and everything, but I would not have wanted to be rooting against McCarthy. And I hope that it plays out one of 2 ways. I hope for great success for JJ, but I hope that it's a kind of a Jordan Love situation for the Vikings, that he stays behind maybe Darnold for 2 or 3 years, so we don't have to see him in a Viking uniform for that, or they deal him to another team outside of the Lions division, and then, he can go have success, go play in the AFC, like with the Raiders, or, there's a half dozen teams that need quarterbacks. Maybe I think the Vikings should hang on to him, but that's my whole thing, is that I wasn't ready for JJ to be rooting against JJ. And so it was nice that there was a whole year where I didn't have to do that, because I would have been. Yeah. The thing that I wouldn't want JJ to go to the Jets. I wouldn't want JJ to go to the Browns. I mean, there's a few organizations I wouldn't want him to go to, even though I just said hopefully he goes to the AFC. But Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, those guys are probably going to go in the top, certainly the top 4. But after that, there's going to be another handful of teams that need quarterbacks. And if you're Minnesota and somebody says, look, we'll give you, number 8 overall for JJ, they might think, oh, we're just going to hang on to him here. They haven't had a chance to evaluate him, especially after the way Darnold played on Sunday. But, there's that chance. I get it. Yeah. No, it's going to be hard to root against JJ. No, we don't want him to go to the Browns. We don't want him to go to the Browns or the Jets. What would be, like I said, the Raiders? Yeah, Andres, I think you need to change fan. You don't be a Browns fan. Nobody in their right mind's a Browns fan. So, you've been born into it, and there's probably nothing you can do by now, but get off the Browns if you can. That's my advice. Get off the Browns. Whoo! All right. 3 more. Rashad says, that's actually great. Keep MSU in their place. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because at the first I was like, yeah, well, you can't have everything. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe you can. Maybe you can. Michigan State basketball is going to be good this year. We got 2 teams. When you look at them, that's going to look pretty good. That's going to be fun. And Ferris says JJ looks like a young Darth Vader. Darth Vader equals James Earl Jones, a Michigan grad. It all fits. Yeah. The Raiders fired their head coach last night. Well, isn't Tom Brady he owns, I don't know, some kind of, he's involved with the ownership there. Tom Brady, Michigan. JJ McCarthy, let's give up. We're the Raiders picking in the top 10. Get JJ. Something like that. Andres. Yeah, don't flip to be a Steelers fan. When I was growing up, I grew up in Detroit. They weren't that mean of streets. Brightmoor. They look pretty mean. I haven't been down there. It's been a long time. But everybody liked the Lions. But the Lions were never in the playoffs. Everybody liked either the Steelers or the Cowboys. I liked the Cowboys. I liked Roger Staubach. I loved Tony Dorsett, Drew Pearson, Randy White. Later, Everson Walls. These are Danny White. The thing for me that kind of sucked and Tom Landry. Loved him. The thing for me about being a Cowboys fan when I was growing up is that I never got any payoff for being a Cowboys fan. I don't remember they won, was it 77 or 78? I think they beat the Broncos. I don't remember that. My first memory was them playing the Steelers in the Super Bowl, and they lost. And that touched off a 10-year period where they would lose the biggest, hardest, most excruciatingly painful games against the 49ers in the NFC Championship game, against the Eagles, against the Bears, against the Rams. And those all killed me. And then when Jerry Jones bought the Cowboys and he declared that and then he fired Tom Landry, I was out. I said, I'm out on the Cowboys. And it took a while, but I swore him off. But this maybe is for you, Andres. It takes a while. I swore the Cowboys off, and even though I said it, I remember when the next year when Pat Summerall and John Madden are doing the Thanksgiving Day game, and you hear, Summerall talking about the Cowboys, and it was just like, wow, this is hard. And then they were great with the Jimmy Johnson and everything. They won those 3 Super Bowls. Even though I was trying not to like them, it was still there, but it worked. It worked after I swore him off it took about 10 years, though, for sure. That's it. I would say for most of my life, I can do it now, but for most of my life, when they show Joe Montana drifting over to the right and throwing that pass to Dwight Clark and Everson Walls is, he's right there. Clark catches the touchdown and the 49ers beat the Cowboys. I would turn away, change the channel, forever. I didn't want to watch that. There were a couple things like that I didn't want to watch. I would never watch that. I would never watch Isaiah throwing the ball to Bird and Bird throwing it to DJ. I hated that. I hated those 2 plays. What were some of the other ones? Those 2. Were there any of that the Lions had any? Oh, I never wanted to watch Brett Favre throwing to Sterling Sharp in the playoff game. I never watched that one. I'm not sure I've ever watched that one since. There were those 3. I don't know if I had one for the wing. I'm sure there are some for the Wings. But that one with the Pistons, the Bird one, there might have been the phantom foul. Although in years later, you say, was that really a phantom foul? So you go back, yeah, it was. It was a phantom foul. So a couple with the Pistons. And then with Michigan, the Cordell Stewart pass, I didn't like watching that one. That was one of those where I can recall. So it's funny as I sit here, time stood still. The game was already over. I had a few friends over. We were playing darts and the game was on in the background. Like, we should just stayed there and watched the whole thing. But, I'm still kind of looking over there and the last 20 seconds or 30 seconds of that game, it feels like I could recap it. It felt like it took 3 hours that I was just standing there. I was, 20 feet away playing darts, and it just kind of was glancing over at the TV. I didn't like watching the Trey Burke block. I can watch that one now. I didn't like watching Chris Webber call the timeout. Oh, I hate traveled, and then I couldn't watch that one. So maybe there are quite a few. Now that I sit here and I'm going through my memory, there are a lot of things that I just refuse to watch. But you get older. I guess it's getting older. I can watch them now. So that's it. Yeah, that's a haunting one. Oh. I don't know if I want to. Oh, this one is from Andres, who didn't like the trouble with the snap. Oh, that was a killer. It was really troubling about that one. It wasn't just for me. I was watching that game with my wife and with my kids. And the kids, it's been a long time. What was that, 2015? Kids were just young and impressionable. And I didn't make a big deal about it. I didn't make it sound like this is the worst loss forever. And this is the worst loss in the history of sports. I didn't want to. They saw it on my face. I can recall. I looked over at my wife, and she was just like, "Don't do it." And I can just remember saying, "It's going to be okay. It's all right. It's just a football game. It doesn't matter." I don't know if I said that, but they knew that it was bad. But if the kids weren't around and the wife weren't around, it could have been worse about that. It was it really felt like they had won that game and they celebrate. But I wasn't celebrating. I mean, by that point, I'm smart enough to you got to make sure you got to get to all zeros on the clock. I've seen this game before. Hell, I was up when Smoker and Duckett and everything. I was up there for that one. So I know you can't count any chickens in a Michigan football game until it's over. But, oh, man, that one, it's kind of giving me heartburn right now even thinking about it. So that one. This one wasn't so hot either. The old JT play. And it felt like that was going to be, and it felt like if Harbaugh, this was before the last 3 years of his time at Michigan, which were all great, culminating with the national championship a year ago today. But it felt like that was his shot. That if Michigan would have beaten Ohio State down there, that if the ref would have called, and he certainly could have called him short, Michigan would have won. It would have felt like things had turned then. And this was going to touch off, Michigan. They're going to reverse everything. Now they're going to have the upper hand against Ohio State. And of course, that didn't happen. And then it looked like it was never going to happen. But yeah, that was a very tough one. That was a very tough one because there were a few calls in that game. That play could have gone either way, but I had to listen to everybody. I had to have my own opinion about that. And my opinion is that play could have been called either way. That's how close it was. And that when you are a referee and you've got 90,000 truck drivers, in a snake pit, screaming at you, you don't really understand, but you kind of understand, why he would make that call. And oh man, Michigan fans, they were so beside themselves with me, like that was the worst. It wasn't the worst call. It was a tough call. I mean, one of the toughest calls ever, but I couldn't really have said that myself, that was a bad call, that it was 100. This was irrefutable video evidence. I saw all the lines being drawn. I watched it myself, No, I couldn't. It was the essence of it could have gone either way. Of course, it went against Michigan, but I'm not reliving that. People want to tell me, it's definitely short. I saw it. Yeah, this one, I didn't like that. Now, Keegan, I'm going to end it with this one. I've told this story, but I like telling it, so I'm going to tell it again. I was in North Yorkshire, England, for the Christian Laettner shot against Kentucky. And I didn't have any Sky satellite. I would get it the next year. So if I was going to watch any American sports, I had to go to an American base and the Armed Forces TV or radio network. That's where I had to watch the game. But, in North Yorkshire, it's 5 or 6 hours ahead. So if you got a game at 7, you're staying up to 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Well, this Laettner game, the Duke Kentucky game, I was watching that game with the biggest Kentucky fan in the world. And it was at his flat. There were a lot of people there we were watching. He was living it up, thinking Kentucky was going to win this game. The problem is the TV feed had gone bad. It was really snowy. And it got so bad in the second half is that you could barely even figure out what was going on in the TV. We would have the radio that was on like a 10-second delay. So you would kind of figure out what was going to happen. And sometimes it would get a little bit better, the resolution, and then it would go out and we'd be listening to the radio. These are problems that those of us that, are that grew up in the 80s and 90s experience. That's it. You hear these stories, but that was it. We couldn't really tell what was going on, and then it was the radio and it was everything, and I don't know. It's very memorable because of all of that. Now, I believe that was the same year that the Fab Five made the national championship game. And that night, I went out to the club. And before the club, I went to the 10 pence pint night. The game wasn't going to start till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning over there. And somebody smashed a pint glass on my head. And let's see. You can probably see it. For those that are watching the YouTube, I still got that scar up there. And what I can tell you is that doesn't matter how many of the 10 pence pints that you have, if somebody takes a glass and smashes it over your head and, gets a big cut, you immediately sober up just like that. Boom. And that's what happened to me. And I ended up, watching that game with a wrap around my head. And then it was such a blowout. It was very dumb. It would have been, I was going to say it would have been worth taking a glass over my head or anything, but it just, it was a memorable night, but it ended, it ended with a thud for real. And then it ended with a thud in the championship game. Losing the championship games, man. To watch the Tigers have done it over the years. That this is the one single game with Michigan in back-to-back years. It's tough. All right. Yeah, Mr. Martini. People love talking about Urban Meyer handpicking those refs. Oh man, Torrey Hunter with that catch instead. The big Poppy home run, that was a tough one too. Oh man. Yeah, look, forget all the heartbreak. That was the whole thing about the Lions. Here we are. We are set over this next month. It's nice that we just get a breather. It's a nice couple days ahead. Tomorrow we've got Penn State, Notre Dame. Then we'll have Texas and Ohio State. Then Saturday, we've got NFL playoffs, both Saturday and Sunday. So what? Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So 4 straight days of great football. And then the Lions are going to be involved. I mean, it's hard for me to, it is hard for me to put in my mind, the Lions have never been a number 1 seed, but here they are. And so then it'll be the Lions. And we will, all these things that we've been talking about, oh, this game, I was here doing all that. We will be poised for the Lions either, to continue that on to, if they can just win 2 games to get to the Super Bowl, would I take? All right, I said this is going to be it. This is going to be it. Would you take the Lions getting to the Super Bowl right now if you knew that they lost in the Super Bowl, like to the Ravens or the Bills or the Chiefs? Would you take that right now? Give me some feedback on that. Feedback it up. They go out and they beat the Rams, and then they beat the Eagles, and they make it to the Super Bowl. Just think about what those 2 weeks will be like, and then they're going to, take it on the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, but then ultimately lose it. But they went further than they did the year before. I can't take it myself. I would enjoy it. I would, hey, they made the Super Bowl. They're almost, but I know, having just talked about all this, and the further that you go, the more painful it is when you lose. So you thought the San Francisco loss hurt last year. You put yourself where you get to the Super Bowl. We have been thinking about this for our entire lives, about the Lions, and many thought I would put myself in that they would never go. I mean, I never saw a path. I never saw it. Couldn't believe it. Never happened in my lifetime. And if they do, it's going to be 2 weeks of just but no, I wouldn't take that. To lose the Super Bowl? No, they got to win it. And I don't know. I thought heading up to the Buffalo that this was going to be their best year because they got Aaron Glenn and they got Ben Johnson specifically, and the rest of the players that they have. But now to see that the defense, it was very encouraging that maybe this will be their best shot to win the Super Bowl. Let's see. Keegan says he would rather have the chance and lose than not go. That's not really an answer. Smash says no. Smash isn't taking it up. He's not taking a guaranteed Super Bowl appearance. He says the Lions need to win the Super Bowl. Here's another Michigan point. He's going to the Texas OSU game. I'm wearing my Michigan gear for sure. My wife thinks I'm crazy. I like that. I want a picture of that. That's it. If you had one shot or one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted in one moment, would you capture it or just let it slip? Is that Eminem? Is that what we're talking about right here? No, nobody's going to say, although this is close. Keegan is saying he wants the chance to lose than not to go. I mean, you're changing, the question. I didn't say, would you rather just lose next week if you were going to get to the Super Bowl and lose? No, I would like, even though it would be more painful, I would enjoy the 2 victories and then the 2 weeks leading up to the Super Bowl. I mean, but it would really hurt. But no, I would want that over losing next week. But no, I wouldn't take let's get to the Super Bowl, but then I have to lose. And I think there's a big maybe about Hutchinson playing in the Super Bowl. Look, I didn't think David Montgomery was going to play anymore. He's playing. And Hutchinson has been, maybe. He's been in the maybe category. Could he get out there and here's the perfect scenario. The Lions win the Super Bowl. But in winning it, Hutchinson comes back, and I don't think he's going to go out there and play, 50 snaps, but he comes in for 10 snaps, and he makes an impact. He has a sack. It's going to be hard for me to say he's the MVP. Can I come up with the 10? He has 3 sacks, a touchdown. No, but he just does. He's just back, and he can celebrate with the team. That would be it. That's it. And the Lions win the Super Bowl. That's it. Here we get some other, or would I take this? Would I rather lose to OSU and not get destroyed by Georgia, setting up the redemptive season the next year? No, if you would have said losing so you can't get into the college football playoff, to play Georgia. So that's the thing. No, I can't I can't see myself accepting any I would rather lose to Georgia. But, you say all those and you go back to 2021 where Michigan lost to Michigan State. And I remember it was at 20, I think it was 30-30. I'm watching the game with like 8 minutes to go. And I'm like, this has been a great football game. No matter what happens, this has been a great football game. I've really enjoyed it. It's very entertaining. And then Michigan lost. And then, for the next week, I had to hear Michigan State. But Michigan ended up beating Ohio State and making it to the college football playoff. I didn't care, really, that Michigan had lost to Michigan State. It's like Ohio. It's the one thing that Michigan has on Ohio State this year, and you'll be able to use it. Ohio State beats Texas, and then they win the national championship. You say, you know what? You guys won the national championship, but you lost to Michigan. You really didn't have the kind of year that you wanted, even though you won the national championship. And you have to ask yourself how you would feel about that. Of course, Michigan last year, they beat Ohio State and they won the national championship, and it felt really good all the way around. If you're asking me, would I take a loss to Ohio State? Michigan gets into the college football playoff and wins a national championship. I would take that, but I wouldn't like it, but I would take it. Those are tough. I don't even know if that's what you're asking me, because you got Georgia in here, but I'm in on winning a national championship. Would I rather beat Ohio State and MSU and miss the playoff, or lose to both and go? Yeah, if I won the national championship, but then I lost to if Michigan lost to both of their rivals, we have gone through the rival loss to Michigan State. It didn't feel that bad afterwards. And that was me taking the pulse and temperature of everyone. So Ohio State's a different animal. No doubt. I'm having a hard time. My brain is like, you're asking me these things. It's like, I feel like I watched something on Netflix about a month ago where the plane crashed in the 70s and in the Andes, and they were out there, stranded for 4 months. And you think about, well, hey, would you eat your dog? No, I'm not. Can't really, until that actually happens. I think you got to wait and see how it goes. They weren't eating their dogs, by the way. That's it. Okay. Thanks so much. We'd love to see you over on the Maize and Blue Review. Go to michigan.rivals.com. Enjoy the college football playoff games, and we will talk with you on Friday. We'll see you then. Play some music.